Lots to talk about. Peter Drucker. So remember, this is, for some of you who have been in the program for a while, we've already done the Essential Drucker once before. I'm not sure how, a couple months ago. I'm going to use my phone version, my phone notes. So today, we were just talking about chapter 3. So it's a pretty, what's the word? Dense book. But chapter 3 is super dense. So we'll talk about all kinds of stuff on here. But let me step back by saying for a second, you know, I was listening to, I have this habit, which I recommend you try as an experiment, of just listening to different, I do it on the treadmill, listen to different highly successful business people while you do your other stuff. Just go to YouTube, put it on the you know, just autoplay and let it run. And it's unreal how much you can learn. So somehow, what I do, I keep 2 tabs open. One of them is the Forbes 400, so the 400 wealthiest people in the world. And so I just pick a new one every day. So I randomly, and I start at the top, you know, Bill Gates is #1 now, and Carlos Slim. Some of these guys don't have very much on them. Like the guy who started, I was listening to the guy who started Dish Network. I don't realize he's worth $21 billion. It's pretty crazy. I forget his name right now. I don't always pay attention to the names. But there was another guy that there's nothing, the richest man in England. He has zero, you cannot find one thing online. So he's pretty secretive. But when I was trying to listen to him, I somehow stumbled on a talk by Jack Dorsey. So Jack Dorsey is the founder of Twitter. And now he's gone on to start another company that I think is also worth $1 billion, which is Square. So that's the little app. People can swipe credit cards in their phones, so small business owners and stuff can take credit cards. So it was an hour-long talk, him in Canada, and he didn't mention Peter Drucker, but he said one thing that kind of reminded me of the same thing. He said, you know, the way he built these businesses, because interestingly enough, I didn't realize this, he had started another company before that failed. And he said all the investors were mad at him, and he pretty much lost everything. And then he moved on to, it was dispatch software, kind of a bizarre business model. But he then pivoted or ended up with Twitter, and he said the reason was, and this is very similar to Peter Drucker-like thinking, he said, you have to figure out what you would want in the world, and then you have to make a bet that millions of other people would want it too. That's what an entrepreneur does. So he said for him, a Twitter feed where you had, you know, names, where you could quickly post your status all the time of what you were doing. He said that's something that would have helped. He was in some company where he wanted to be able to do that, so everybody could share what they were doing during the day. But he didn't want it too long because then people would not read it, #1, and people would babble. So he just got this idea for these short things. So that is the Essential Drucker. If you've read the book, really the essential part of the Essential Drucker is chapter 3, and it's the same thing that Jack Dorsey was saying, is that, you know, here's you, why, and here's millions of other potential, you know, C's, customers. And it takes a special knack to really intuitively be able to go, is something that I want, something these other millions of people will want. And I was at this angel investment group the other day where there's 12 businesses pitching for 5 minutes their business ideas. And you could see this same thing playing out right here. Some of them were experienced entrepreneurs and some of them weren't, but the same thing. Some of these guys were very you-centered businesses. I could tell they wanted it, but I couldn't imagine that any volume of other people would want it. One of the apps was it was for younger people. It was just something I couldn't see anyone under 21 using. He was like 45. I could see a lot of 45-year-olds using it, but I couldn't see any 21-year-old, and because it was an app. I don't want to say what it is because maybe he's on this call, he'll be insulted. But it was basically an app for people under 21 to do some kind of, it was like charitable or something. So first of all, in my experience, kids under 21, they are interested. I mean, humans innately are interested in charity, okay? Because there's a that's one of the cognitive biases called Kantian fairness, right? So we have a fairness mechanism built into our head. By the way, I was reading a book, 500 years ago, or even 200 years ago, this wasn't really known. There's, I think it was John Locke or one of these guys who said, if there was no one overseeing humans, humans would do all kinds of evil. But now we know that's not completely true. There's a cool YouTube video where it's all these cameras that are like traffic cameras around the world, where somebody compiled all the good things that people do without others knowing it, because you don't usually realize there's a traffic camera on you. So there's somebody whose car was stalled in the middle of traffic, and all these people come out of nowhere and push it out of the way. There was a little kid who fell, and people picked him up and spent an hour taking him to his parents or whatever. Just there was like hundreds of things. You can look it up on YouTube. It's like good deeds, Good Samaritan traffic camera compilation. So going back to this guy's idea was he's going to make an app, and it somehow connects kids with charities and stuff like that. So this is an example, whether you're watching this as a super experienced entrepreneur or somebody who's just starting out. Because if you're a super experienced entrepreneur, you're still having to roll out new product innovations all the time. It's not like you just make one product. Look at Twinkie. They made Twinkie, and eventually they went bankrupt. Even those iconic things eventually either get stale around the product, or the marketing gets stale, or whatever happened to Twinkie. So if you're an experienced entrepreneur, you got to get good at this, like what Jack Dorsey had, that sixth sense that says, yeah, I want this, and a lot of people will too. And then you bet your life on it, because that's really what you do. Jack Dorsey now is almost 40 years old. He made 2 good bets. It sounds like he's made 3 bets. One bet was on that dispatch software when he was in his early 20s. Didn't work out, but that's fine, because life usually, if you live long enough, going to give you more than one bet. But it's also not going to give you 100 bets. So you want to get pretty good pretty fast, or else you're 50 and you're still making a bet, that. And there is a saying, the only bet that has to win is the last one you make. There's some truth to that, but there's also truth to the fact that humans are mortal. So if your last bet that works is when you're 92, you're going to have a year to enjoy it, then you're dead. So this app for these kids, it's hard for me to explain, but as an investor, I was like, there's something missing in that. I don't see kids downloading an app that connects them to a charity. I could see kids downloading an app that's like gamified or something, where every 10 Candy Crush things you do, one of them gets given to charity, like Tom's shoes or something like that. It was just off, the idea. And it really was, I think, because the dude building it was like 50. Now, that's not to say that a 50-year-old guy can't build a product for a young kid, but you better be very intuitive if you're trying to make some, like for me, if I try to make a product that's female clothing, okay, I'm either going to fail, which is the most likely, or number 2, I'm the most intuitive guy on the planet. Generally, most female retail clothing lines are either by women or gay guys. That's just a fact, people who are tapped into feminine. And then guys do better making guy stuff. I know that sounds obvious, but it's less obvious than you think, because entrepreneurs, and this is the other thing. So this is scenario number 1, and I'm saying bad scenario. You build something that you want, and then you try to market it to a group of people that doesn't want it. Like, I thought that app for that guy, I thought he was going to say it's for older people, because it sounded like a great idea for parents, for example. Parents download the app, then they try to get their kids to go off and do these charity things. It didn't, he had like the targeting off. It was going to market it to the kids. You know, that's not, if you build Disneyland, I just went to I haven't been to Disneyland since I was a teenager, so I wanted to go there just to see what it was like. So took a couple of people from the office, went to Disneyland last month. Disneyland's very smart. That thing is fun at all ages. And if you go see like a movie now, Despicable Me 2, and I think this started back with Sesame Street. If you're an adult watching Sesame Street, they put jokes in there that only you get. And the reason they do that is they understand their target market. Parents are going to have that TV set on. So if they make a cartoon or a show that's only for 5-year-olds, but the parents can't stand the voice, let's say, parents are going to turn it off. So again, Sesame Street, Disney, they are more sophisticated in understanding who the customer is. They don't just build a Disney park that parents sit around on benches. I was there at Disney, every single ride that has kids on it has the parents having fun too. So number one, you build a product that you want and then you try to sell it to a group of people that don't want it. That's very common. Number two, we can go through 40 iterations of how to get it wrong. It's a little bit like, was it Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, one of those Russian writers, where he said, every happy family is happy in the same way. And I'm butchering the quote, but every unhappy family is basically dysfunctional in a different way. Think about that. That's very profound. It's a little bit like this Peter Drucker thing. Every successful company has almost identical ingredients. You could just name companies off, top companies here. And one of the main ingredients, they got this thing right. Twitter. Is it true that it makes sense you would ever want to have short updates from your friend versus long updates? I think that is, especially from acquaintances. And it's interesting, Facebook has had to keep up with Twitter, and what Facebook now does, if you look at the Facebook wall, when you're just scrolling through, it's almost now all viral videos. Have you noticed that? They've completely changed their business model. And I know why. It's because friends and acquaintances, let's say the average person has 1,500 Facebook friends. They don't know most of those people very well. You just added different people. So Facebook's wall started losing engagement because people you didn't know are able to write stuff this long and able to put in pictures that you don't care about. And so Facebook now it's very interesting. I mean, I was talking about this like 1 year ago. I was like, I think Facebook is going to either innovate or disappear, and they innovated. Be careful when you bet against big companies, because a lot of times there's the smart people, the smarts that took them to build Facebook are still there in their brain, so they are smart enough to innovate, and they innovated, and now Facebook is more entertainment feed. Much more. I mean, most of the videos you're watching are not from your friends. And it's interesting what Facebook does, if you've noticed this. Always remember in the 67 steps, the first 67 step is to be aware. So when you look at Facebook, you got to look at it with a smart eye, not just as a random person. So when I look at Facebook, I notice when you scroll into your feed, about the first 10 things you see are not from anybody really that you know very well. They're just viral videos that have a crap load of views and shares. Then after you scroll down long enough, they start showing you your own friends. What they're basically saying is your own friends are not that interesting, which is true. Like the average friend you have does not have that interesting of a life. Even the friends you think are, it's very hard to be prolific in life. Remember that. Leonardo da Vinci is remembered, or these people, because they were prolific. because no one else is freaking prolific. It's hard to make. Look at actors that make good movies. How many actors make solid, every movie they ever make is good? No, most of them, music, one-hit wonders, right? So Facebook has built a product without knowing it, or maybe they do know it, around chapter 3, satisfaction of a customer's desire. And that is something that we could talk about in business for 10 hours, and we still would only be scratching the surface of what that means. So going back to Dostoevsky or Tolstoy, whoever said it, every successful company is basically successful in the same way. Every successful human has almost identical traits. For example, you'll never meet a successful person who's like, you know the secret to my success? I never do anything all day. I'm the least productive person you've ever met. I have no willpower. If I see a candy bar, I eat the candy bar. Like I have nothing. If someone says, hey, let's go play, I know I should be doing this business thing, and someone's like, let's go to the movies. I always, no, there's no one like that. Every successful person, if you go through that Forbes list, they all say the same thing. They got an idea that lots of people wanted. Carlos Slim owns cell phone companies in Mexico. People want cell phones in Mexico, and not just a few people, basically 100% of a country, and I think he has a monopoly on it. Bill Gates, before Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, there was a famous quote, I forget who it was, somebody from IBM or somebody said, I think the market for personal computers in the world is like 100 or something. Somebody bet against Bill Gates and was like, just imagine this, literally just imagine the state of mind that you're in with no level of intuition. You're a big business owner. Somebody look that up. Look that up, Maya. Who's the one who said, be like famous bad quotes, It's actually funny. There's a whole list if you Google famous stupid quotes. Or there was a guy back in the early 1900s who said, the aircraft I can see is a famous general. There will never be a use of an airplane in military operations.
Cars will replace horses.
Yeah, cars. How would a car replace? I could get the car replacing the horse one, but how could you never foresee that an airplane that flies in the air would have any use? But that shows you how easy it is to not be intuitive. And going back to the 67 steps, the reason, I made that first 67 step the most important one, awareness, is because intuition is learned. Jack Dorsey, his first business wasn't that intuitive. He didn't read the market. He came up with a product that nobody wanted. Peter Thiel, in his book 0 to 1, he says he goes, you want to go after a niche, but you want to make sure there's an actual customer. He went after a niche so small, it didn't exist. He started building software for Palm Pilots after nobody was using Palm Pilots anymore. So guess what happens there? Failure. So for you, the kind of the takeaway, one of the first takeaways I want you to focus on, and I'm assuming you've read this book, so I'm not just going to go page by page through this book. But when Peter Drucker says, let me read it here, my notes.
It said no one will ever want a computer in their own home.
Yeah, there's a lot. Who said it?
And 77, right?
All right, so there is only one valid definition of business purpose: to create a customer. Markets are not created by God, nature, or economic forces. So he's saying, and this is also something that people really don't grasp, especially some of you, depending on what level you're in this business program, have access to the persuasion stuff. So a lot of people go, Ty, I don't want to be in sales. That's not my thing. And I said, well, it's a little bit like my mom told me, Ty, you can have anything you want in life, but you can't have everything. Cake and eat it too kind of thing. So a lot of people go, Ty, I want to be rich, or I want to have a highly successful business that's very profitable, spins off a lot of money that I can reinvest in the business or go live in the Bahamas, raise my kids, buy a couple houses, cars. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Do you want to be a sales-focused person? No. And I'm like, well, that's asking for your cake and eating it too. You can't have both things. They go together. And that's why, and this is statistically backed. 75% of billionaires, if you were on that other call I did, in the most recent study of billionaires, are salespeople. Because markets are created. So let me explain how this works together. So first you have an intuitive idea. Hopefully that's in line with reality. So you're not going, you know what people really want right now? They want to have, a better carriage for their horse. If you come up with that idea right now, unless you're selling to the Amish, you've created you're the least intuitive person on the planet because everybody uses cars now. So let's assume you're not that weak, or your intuition isn't that weak. You can actually conjure up an idea, or if you have an existing business, a new angle for your business. The next thing though is you have to create the market. So number one, let's say, is intuition. Like Jack Dorsey talked about, he's built intuition. And the second one is you have to create markets. And he says there, markets are always created. Even if you go into, let's say you go into fast food, that's a market that you would think is already created. But you won't succeed unless you create a market within that market. So In-N-Out, for example, in California, fast food, they've kind of built like a cult following. That's pretty much what In-N-Out is. They don't advertise. So it's almost like a hipster kind of place where anti-McDonald's, a lot of people who go to In-N-Out that I know, they're like, I would never go to McDonald's. It's funny. They don't realize it's the same stuff, and I bet you if you look through their vendors where they purchase food, they're probably buying from the same places. It's a little bit like the car. Lexus is built at the same factories where they built Toyotas, on the same chassis. The difference is Toyota literally created out of thin air a marketplace where people would want Lexuses, right? Like nobody woke up one day and said, I want a Lexus. You have to create that. So creating a market, I don't know that I'll get into this today because that's a long conversation on how you create a market, but let me just summarize it by saying you better be a persuasive person, or persuasive in how you present what you do. And I'll tell you the biggest thing I took away from going to that, sitting on this panel of investors where we were looking at these 12 businesses gave us 5-minute pitches. One of them was persuasive. The other 11 was what I always, I've taught this to like Maya and some of the people on staff. Some people, it's almost like, did you de-optimize on this on purpose? I almost felt like if you wanted to give a speech, for example, and you wanted nobody to be persuaded, what would you do? You'd be monotone. Out of 12 people, 11 of them couldn't get their PowerPoint video thing to run. Literally 11 of them. So that meant that this is what made me not want to invest in any of them. If you're the 7th person in line to present, and the first 6 can't get the PowerPoint presentation to run right, what would you be doing while theirs are going? I'd be practicing. Every one of them got up on stage and just was like, okay, I'm going to do my PowerPoint, and then it didn't work. I'm like, didn't you watch the last 6 people? They were very non-intuitive people, at least when it came to presenting. And so that is like, go back to that kind of cliche I always talk about. If you're a tree in the forest and you fall, does anyone hear you fall? And the answer is, who cares? It's supposed to be a philosophical question, but in the modern world, it's really a who cares situation. Trust me, right now, there are people out there that had something better than Twitter that you and I have never heard of. Meaning, the odds of Jack Dorsey being the first one to come up with some little short feed, I guarantee you someone else did it. Just like there's been about 10,000 social networks launched, actually more than that. but at least 10,000 dating sites, social network. How many sites do you know about? Like 3 or 4. Because most of them can never create the market. They can never persuade people that you should move, because people don't like to move from what they're doing. I'm reading this great book, it's back in the other room. It's called something like, it's a weird title. It's like, what makes your brain happy and why you shouldn't do that, or something. It's all about cognitive biases. And it basically says, it's really big. The biggest takeaway, I'm gonna write a book of the day for today on it. And it talks about the amygdala. And what it says that's so great is that this amygdala part of the brain is not talked about enough. So that's the nerve fear center. And so nobody's moving from what they're already doing to what you want them to do unless you're you-centered, you know? And you-centered people go broke every day. Remember, 80%, I think there's about 20 to 30 million small businesses in just the US. Globally, I'm sure it's probably closer to 500 million maybe, because there's actually more in some countries where everyone has a little store. Man, 80% of them are going out of business. Or in America, for example, there's a tax status called non-employer. That means you have no employees, it's just you as a business owner. The average non-employer, I can't remember, they make like 40 grand a year, which is less than the average person makes, which means the average entrepreneur in the wealthiest country in the world, the United States, the US is wealthier than the 5 next countries combined, you know, Germany, Japan. So in the wealthiest country, almost all of the entrepreneurs, especially the small ones, they'd make more money being a manager at, you know, Target. So it's they're doing something for nothing. And the reason is they're not on this call. I mean, it's literally that simple. Not obviously this call. They haven't read this. They don't know the stuff that's on this call. If they did, they'd realize and go, I've created them. I'm either haven't created a market or I'm selling to, you know, 8 people. Even Jack Dorsey said, another interesting thing he said is, the hardest part for him of business is how do you create a customer? Which I thought was interesting because Twitter has about 500 million registered accounts, I think, or maybe 1 billion somewhere. Square has already grown to be, I think, $1 billion valuation. So he's not that bad at figuring out how to create a customer, but it's interesting. The people at the top, it's interesting at what they focus on. So even as a guy who's created a company, imagine if you create a company with 500 million people using it pretty often, which is Twitter. What still does he think about all day long? It's like this game of creating customers. So when I meet at the average entrepreneur, somebody thinking, and I ask them, like, what's your biggest concern? Not many people say creating a customer. People say other stuff. You know what most people say? Logo. That's a big one for entrepreneurs. Like, they are fixated on like website, name, logo, all colors of the website. You know, if they're opening a restaurant, you know, things like hiring, all those things that are components of a business. But if you gave me 2 entrepreneurs, one person spends, out of an 8-hour day, spends 6 hours a day focusing on creation of a customer. And then some of the other stuff, they're sloppy on. So like they're a little bit sloppy on who they hire. I'm actually working on this TV show concept. I'm testing different ones where it's gonna be a little bit like American Idol kind of thing, where it's like we judge different entrepreneurs. If I walk into a restaurant somebody started, and I go in the back office, it's sloppy back there. They got old computers there. I posted a picture on my Instagram when I was in Palm Springs with my laptop and all these books and stuff. Number 1 comment was about the laptop. Like, why do you use an old keyboard? Like, I got a better, and I'm thinking, you guys are very smart, but focused on the wrong thing. So if I go into some entrepreneur's restaurant and in the back, it's all sloppy. I ask him about his hiring techniques. It's also sloppy. You ask him about his accounting. It's sloppy. You know, he's like, I haven't been doing it right. So I would be less concerned if he offset that by, in the back, there's a big whiteboard, and it's the most well thought out customer acquisition plan known to mankind. Because you can hire an accountant, you can hire a maid that will clean up your, who cares if it's dirty back there? You can hire somebody, a headhunter, that hires his managers. What you can't hire is somebody who's good at creating marketplaces and persuading customers to buy. Because think about it, there's no consultant who's really going to do that, because if they were good at it, they would be doing it and becoming a billionaire themselves. So there's some things you can hire help on. Like every person on this call can hire somebody who's a better cook than them. So that's why I don't cook. You know, if you like cooking because you just like it, that's fine. But I don't like it, and it's a horrible use of my time, you know? And what I do think a lot about is what Peter Drucker said. How can I go from having zero let's take the 67 steps, you know, or take the book of the day thing. That's kind of the entry point where people come in who hear about what I do, and that just got started kind of off the cuff. I'm already reading books. A lot of my friends were like, oh, we don't have time to read. And I said, okay, intuitively, are there a lot of people like my friends who wish they read more? So what do? You can go into a stage of discovery. So everywhere I went for a while, I would just ask people. If you're getting food at a restaurant, ask them. Be like, you know, what's the last good book you read? People usually struggle to think up a book. They're like, oh, you know, I read The Four Agreements. They usually pull out an Oprah book, depending on who you're talking to. And then I go, yeah, I'm working on reading a book a day. You know what everybody says? Oh man, I wish I read more. So all of a sudden, it's got the gears going, intuition, you know, and I go, if I like it, and everybody I talk to, I bet you there's millions, and there is. And so then from scratch, you know, I think I have the biggest book club in the world, nonfiction book club in the world. That just created a whole marketplace out of zero. There's no one doing that before, really, that I know of. You know, when I was growing up in high school, there wasn't an email list where you could get a book summary sent to you or thoughts on a book. So that's the beginning. And if you do this right, here's the cool thing. In that Jack Dorsey video, the guy who's introducing Jack Dorsey says, you know, you've created 2 companies that are worth billions of dollars, and you did it in under 7 years. How does that feel? And I forget what Jack Dorsey said, but my friend James, who some of you know, talked to on the phone, that works here, James met Jack Nicholson. He used to interview people for Esquire magazine and all this. And so this is back, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. So he asked Jack Nicholson, he goes, how does it feel to be Jack Nicholson? You know, you go down the street, everybody loves you, you've got mansions and millions of dollars, women love you. And he said, Jack Nicholson turned to him and said, well, it doesn't suck. You know, and that's probably what Jack Dorsey said. How does it feel to start out of thin air 2 companies worth billions of dollars when the average entrepreneur can't even make the national average $50,000 a year? I guarantee you. Now, Jack Dorsey's a little more quiet than Jack Nicholson, and he just said, I forget what he said, but I bet you his answer is, well, it doesn't suck. It doesn't suck to be a multi-billionaire, you know, under 40 years old. And all he did, because if you think of Twitter, just think about it. There's some technology there that's a little difficult. But there's no one here who it's outside of our IQ to have come up with Twitter. Now, if you asked me to come up with Microsoft, that was a very hard business. I don't think I could have done it, because Microsoft isn't just one little gadget. Microsoft is everything from, building software is extremely intelligent. They had to hire about 100,000 people to build Microsoft and be run by one of the highest IQ people on planet Earth, Bill Gates, for a long time. And it took him 40 years or whatever. So when I look at that, I go, okay, that was an IQ play. Like his IQ trumped everything, and willpower. Those are the two big ones. According to that book, Willpower, that those scientists wrote, those are the two most predictive factors in being successful, IQ and willpower. But when I look at Twitter, I don't think that. Everybody here could have literally been driving on a road trip and had 2 hours to spare and come up with it. It's 140 characters. You make a simple profile. You can favorite or share it. They call the shares retweet. And I guarantee you, in modern technology, with modern technology, it's not hard to hire a couple architects, engineers, software engineers that could build that for you. So what Twitter did was a game of intuitively creating a market before everybody else. It's not that hard. Snapchat, not that hard. Disappearing photos, that's all Snap. Instagram is actually the easiest one. You know, Instagram it's a picture collage site, basically. People just post pictures. You can't even reshare them. They just came up with two functions. You can like them, who already had invented like Facebook. What's the second thing you could do with it? Comment. Comments have been around since forums in the 1990s. That's the only two functions Instagram has. Post, and they didn't have video for a long time. I think it was already $1 billion company before. So again, the game of business is very hard, but it's becoming easy if you can be that, because they were persuasive. It's a persuasive app. The simplicity of it's persuasive. You know, the quote unquote, what they call value proposition is. All right, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna switch subjects here. By the way, if you have any questions, let me check here. I'd like to answer them in real time here before I move on to the next dealio here. Oh, yes, the personal computer quote was from Tom Watson at IBM. So IBM, at one point, was the dominant computer company, and they bet against personal computers. Like that. And by the way, the reason everyone in this room probably would have done the same thing, it's called confirmation bias. There's something wrong with our brains. Anytime you meet somebody that thinks their brain is on track, even the smartest people's brains are all messed up. Our brains are so, if you ask a scientist, our brains are beyond repair, unfortunately. Greatest invention mankind could ever come up with is exactly like that limitless pill in that movie with Bradley Cooper, or that movie Lucy. If you could take a pill and rewire your brain, you'd be set. This world we live in, every person, if you're in the diet business, like you're selling health food or something, or diet plans or P90X, you can be in business for a long time, because the human brain is built to do the opposite than diet. I mean, 60% of people are obese, or overweight, I should say. It's going to be hard for that number to go down until somebody figures out a way to rewire the brain. Which, by the way, the reason the 67 steps I built that, is for myself to start out with, is it is the tool that I use, and I've seen it work now all over the world every day. That's a rewiring tool. Even these calls you're on, look, this is not an MBA program. This is a rewiring program specifically around making money and business. So you can see there that Tom Watson says to Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, the market for personal computers in the world is going to be like 1 or 100 computers. Why? Because Tom Watson, even though he's brilliant, started IBM. His brain had something called the confirmation bias, which means once you believe something, you start seeing signs to back you up. And that's what happens in religion, okay? Think of a religion, I'm gonna make this simple. Think of a religion you don't agree with, okay? I never want to attack the religion that people believe in, because it's impossible. So if you're a Christian, think about something that you think is horrible spiritually to believe in. Well, if you could get inside the head of the other person who has the belief opposite of you, and this isn't just religion, by the way. This is politics. Politics is even more. Think about politics. If you're a conservative and you could get inside of the head of a liberal, they'd be doing the same thing you're doing, which is putting blinders on and confirming their own thing. So if you're a conservative, you will only look for news articles that confirm your bias. You'll just be like, see, here's an example where the government stepped in and things got worse. You will blind everything, put on blinders for everything opposite, where private business made it worse, and vice versa. And so Tom Watson, back when Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are just young guys with no money, which means IBM could have built the first personal computers and dominated that whole game. All they had to do was what? They had all the money. This is I think Bill Gates and Steve Jobs was in the late 70s where they were pitching this idea. If you've ever seen that movie Jobs with Ashton Kutcher, you know, he goes in and he presents, I think, to Stanford, and he says, we've got this personal computer, and every professor in there laughed at them like, oh, what is this stupid idea, personal computers? And then one guy followed them out. So Steve Jobs, not Bill Gates, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, they walk out of Stanford depressed, and one guy comes up to him and says, I have a little computer store or a hardware store if you can make me 1,000 of these computers. And that was what started what now is, I think Apple now is the biggest company in the world by market cap or whatever. So, most valuable company. Tom Watson had the blinders over his intuition. And so one of the things that'll make you more intuitive is seeing things like they really are, which is a fairly painful experience. For example, I posted on Facebook the other day, you know, you got to get rid of delusion. And one of the delusions we have is when our life isn't working out the way we want it, we go, well, everything happened for a reason. Okay, that's a way of overcoming pain. Because if you're 70 years old and you look back on your life and nothing worked out the way you wanted, you're going to put the blinders on and confirm this feeling of not wanting to have pain by going, well, you know what, it all kind of worked out in the end. It doesn't all work out in the end unless you make it work out, you know? Sure, everything happens for a reason from a cause and effect standpoint, but people mean it as in everything happens for a reason, like it turns out great. It doesn't turn out great. You know, how could you look at the world that we live in and go, everything's working out great? Well, it depends who you are, you know. How about, I read something, there's like still 100 million people in some form of slavery in the world. Would you look at them and be like, it's all, everything working out in the world? No, it's not working out for them. You know, little kids I saw in the news, somebody set their own kid on fire, a 3-year-old. It didn't work out for that kid. It doesn't all work out, but you can make it. And that's one of the 67 steps, if you remember. You have to make the plane go where you want it to go. That takes willpower. And that takes intuition. Think of intuition as like the compass, you know? A lot of people, maybe you can look back in business where your compass was off. You're hardworking on the wrong thing. Jack Dorsey's first business, he worked very hard. And I'll give you one more example of this blinders. So Bill Gates, so Tom Watson's the first computer guy. The next evolution of computers comes out. It goes from big computer mainframes, those huge ones that fill up buildings that IBM made. These two young kids out of a garage, really three, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Wozniak, they go, those big computers, there's going to be a market for little teeny computers. The big guy who owns that massive IBM company says, no, those guys are on the wrong track. He has the blinders on, okay? But let's not excuse Bill Gates, because Bill Gates then becomes the dominant guy building laptops and home computers. And guess what happens? Somebody comes to Bill Gates and says, you know what the future is? The internet. And you know what Bill Gates said? No way. Literally, he admits that. So he put the blinders on, and his intuition was completely off. Because it doesn't take a genius to go, you know what? Internet. You can connect the world versus you just have a local computer that's just your computer. And I was listening to Larry Ellison. If you know who he is, he's also one of the richest men in the world. And he was saying this internet thing. He's like cloud computing. I watched a YouTube video from like 2000 or something like that, where Larry Ellison was like, I'm telling you, nobody's gonna do stuff on a computer anymore. They're gonna just have the computer there to type into. Everything's gonna be on a cloud. Your email address isn't gonna be an Outlook. Remember when everything was an Outlook on your computer? Now, if you took that computer right there and you threw it in the trash, I would lose nothing. Now I save 0 on my computer. I even save to Dropbox folders. So the cloud is the next evolution. Now, each person watching this, whatever business you're in, I'm going to give you some predictions I have for the future. One of them is an ongoing trend, okay? And I read about a book. I read this book when I was a teenager by Faith Popcorn. It's a weird name. I don't know. I hope she wasn't born with that name, but it's called Cocooning. I think that's how I spell it, something like that. Cocooning. Isn't cocoon with a C-O? Am I right? All right, doesn't matter. Cocooning, like a butterfly goes in a cocoon. So she predicted that technology will help people cocoon. So let's say you're watching this and you're old school and you go, in my day, we picked up the phone and talked to people. Okay, get with the times, okay? Because first of all, the Amish when you're on the phone, would be like, you know what, when we were young, we would go see people face to face. So everybody's always on the next, thinking that whatever blinders they're in, like this is the good old days. It's not the good old days, man. The 50s wasn't the good old days. Let me just update anybody. Anybody who wishes for a 1950s America or world, it just depends who you are, you know? If you were a black person, you wouldn't want to live in the 1950s. They were setting people on fire and releasing dogs and stuff. It was a horrible time. If you were a woman married to a guy who beat you up, it was a horrible time because you couldn't hardly get divorced because you couldn't get a job and societal pressures. So the 50s weren't good times. They were only good times for a certain little pocket of people. It wasn't a good time to live in Russia. If you see this new movie that's out, what's it called? Child 44, great movie out right now by Tom Hardy. Dude, 1950s Russia was gulag, sending people off to Siberia for nothing, just because they didn't like how you sneezed, basically. I'm reading the book Roots by Alex Haley, so it won a Pulitzer Prize. Man, the 1800s was god-awful times. For, about 10 million black people got thrown over boats on the way to be sold into slavery. It's a horrible time for lots of people. So cocooning, going back to this, the way technology is going to come down, the way the world is, it's going to allow you to hide from people. And it started the day that phone started. Somebody came up with the idea for an answering machine. Because answering machine, what if you don't want to answer the phone because you're cooking? Before, like Louis C.K. said, he's like, back in the 50s, when the phone rang, it just rang. It just sat there and rang until you hung up. But the next thing came out, you had answering machines. I remember my mom had those little cartridges, like little tapes. Then after that came voicemail. Then after that came email. All of you using email, I predict email will disappear. I've already been on the trend. Email is a very weak tool. It's one of the weakest tools out there for lots of reasons. For a business owner, it's a weak tool. It still works a little bit. I still have to use it, but I'm not building my future business around it. You got to build around what nobody can see. And if you do that, that's how you create marketplaces, because you're in the first third of people. Think about when texting has taken over, and now it's everything from WhatsApp. By the way, I went to Czech Republic in about 2004 or something, or maybe a little earlier. And I remember this guy had this guy who was like a tour guide. Daniel was his name. I forget his last name. He was a big bodybuilder. He was former Mr. Czech Republic. So he was this monstrous dude. And I remember it was back when phones, like to text the letter C, you had to go to the A and press it 3 times. And he just was there texting, and I didn't even know what a text was. I think it was 2002. I remember going, what are you doing? Why don't you just call? And he goes, this is cheaper, and I don't like talking to people. And I remember, well, guess what my thought was? This is so stupid. Because I had the blinders on, okay? Now imagine if I had read the Peter Drucker book, imagine if I had been on this call. There was no one giving these calls back in 2002. If I had listened to this call and I went to Czech Republic, because it's a great way to learn the new trends is to go to another country. That's what the Red Bull guy came up with, Red Bull, traveling to Japan. And there's lots of businesses that way. So if I was in Czech Republic and I had been like, wait a second, if this guy likes it, see if one customer likes it, I could have placed a bet that a lot of people would want it because nobody was doing it in America. And I could have started building something. Let's say I come up with a name. I'm like, I'm going to call it WhatsApp, or whatever tool. Well, those WhatsApp guys did do that and made $22 billion, under 30 years old. That's the price and the penalty of having blinders on, of not understanding what Peter Drucker says. You're only in the business of satisfying customer desires. Remove the word customer, just say human desires. And you have to be a little bit ahead of the game because people don't always know what they want. Like if you would ask me in 2002, do I want texting? I would have said no. But, so the creation of a market here also comes from having that, you got to have a serious vision. And you got to be, I don't think you have to be the first. I just think you got to be in the first 1/3. So whatever business you're in right now, some of you in financial services, some of you are in health services, some of you are, in the movie business, entertainment, apps. One of the problems that kills vision, I talked about it was the blinders, but here's another very common one. This is a deadly one. Building around what worked in the past. So people keep the blinders on, and I see this. I'll give you a good example. Here, the way I think Hollywood's going to go down, it's going to be so revolutionary that everybody here in Hollywood is about to get caught with their pants down. It's a little bit like Warren Buffett says, when the tide comes in, you see who's swimming naked. When the waves go down, all of a sudden it's all these people. And that's what happened in 2008 with the mortgage crisis. A whole bunch of people paid too much money for houses. That's all that happened. Trust me. There was some fraud, okay? But it was mostly greed on both sides. And this is the key. It was the banks who were greedy, but it was people signing their name on the line that made $50,000 a year that were buying $300,000 houses. That might be too true for some people, and some people get mad. But if you know me, I don't really care. If it's true, you might as well say it, because the truth is kind of like putting iodine on a wound. It hurts like hell, but then it gets rid of the bacteria. What do you want? I get gangrene, and that's what happens in the world. Nobody says the truth. So I'll make this prediction on a little side note. There was going to be another real estate bubble, just like 2008, because nobody ever poured iodine into the wound of the brain. You don't want to be buying real estate when everybody says real estate is a good idea. That's on a little side note. I think it was J.P. Morgan or one of those guys said he knew the depression was coming when his shoe shine boy started giving him stock tips. His shoe shine boy's like, what's going to be good stock? You know how to get rich? Da, da, da. Well, I remember this back in 2000. This is why I didn't lose money in the real estate. 2008 had no effect on me. In fact, 2008, I made more money than 2007. Not because I'm so smart. It was because one of my mentors, when I was a teenager, told me that little quote that I just gave you. He said, I can't remember if it was Morgan or Rothschild, Carnegie, one of the, I just remembered it. So it's not a matter of being smart, it's a matter of who you listen to. So the second, I remember everybody was telling me to buy condos in La Jolla and this and that and that. You know, I have some real estate, but it was fine. It was because I knew, I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, so blinders, one of the big blinders, what I was saying about Hollywood caught with their pants down, is everybody's looking back and going, you know how Quentin Tarantino revolutionized movies? He made like these crazy dialogue, violent movies, and so that's what I'm going to make. Or, man, Mark Zuckerberg made a social network, and you know, you get a lot of people on it. I just had a friend last year put $1 million or more into this business idea. He wanted me to invest. I was like, no. Because his idea was a social network built around, I forget what it was built. It was just a little, and I was thinking, this guy has the blinders on of get super excited that Mark Zuckerberg made a $100 billion company. So he's just building the same thing. But remember what Peter Thiel says, the next Mark Zuckerberg will not build a social network. It'll be something that we right now, most people think's a little bit weird. If I would have told you about Twitter 1 year before, people would have been like, that's weird. You know? So, cocooning is something of the future, a trend. Another trend is that people are going to build a lot of businesses around what worked in the past. And if you can put an angle on it that's not been done before. Let's say you want to get into, I like to use Hollywood because we're here in Hollywood. You want to be an actor, for example. I'll give you just a practical example. If I wanted to be an actor, which I don't, if I want to be a movie producer, if I want to be a director, I would not read the story of George Lucas and you know, great directors and go, that's how you do it. You know, you go and you network a lot and you make this and you get a short and you get in Cannes and all that. I mean, that might work, but I would do something like you see here, the billboards, these people who have 1.8 million YouTube subscribers, and they're more popular than TV actors now. That's why I said be the first third. I'm not even saying you have to be the first. You actually don't want to be the first person to do something. The first person rarely is successful because there's not enough people interested. But now, why would you want to be see, actors are the worst on this. And business people too. Entrepreneurs are horrible on this. They see Jack Dorsey and they start rolling out apps. I mean, there's a good chance that it won't even be apps. That 10 years from now, I have a hard time believing it'll be apps. It'll be, I would guess, you know, cloud-based. There's a lot of people talking about what's next after apps. Maybe it'll be apps. I don't know. But I would not try to build a WhatsApp right now because brand effect would just crush us. If I try to make because I love texting, I think the next thing maybe would be, I mean, I haven't even thought about this before this. Maybe it'll be, I think video will always trump words, and audio will always trump words. And you see WhatsApp doing this where you can hold the button down and use it as like a voice memo. I think that's a very future trend. And I think with bandwidth, I think video will be one. I think, you know, just snapping. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about that one. But I just know it won't be another WhatsApp. I can't fathom somebody just building an identical thing. And even if they do one time, it'll be a one-hit pony. Like 10 people won't do it. So how do you stay on the cutting edge? This is a big question. Let's go through a few of these other things. Because I never got past the first part of Peter Drucker, chapter 3. Asked what a business is. The typical businessman is likely to answer an organization to make a profit. The typical economist is likely to give the same answer. The answer is not only false, it's irrelevant. Oh yeah, that's what I want to say. So here's the other blinder. Going for the past, that's one. Here's another big one. And I saw this 100% of those people, well, not 100%, out of those 12 people who pitched last week, I would say 11 of them were victim of this. me see if I should illustrate one of the good ones too. Well, no. So chasing profit. So think of what Peter Drucker said. It's very profound. He specifically says the purpose of a business isn't profit, okay? So that means if you chase something that isn't the purpose, you're chasing the wrong thing. It's just logic. So think about this. How many people have you ever met that tell you, I have a next $1 billion idea or $1 million idea? Honestly, and how many times have you ever thought it in your own brain? Dude, this could make me millions, okay? What Peter Drucker is saying very clearly here is not only is that focus false, it's irrelevant. And he gives an example. He says, where does he talk about surgeons? Oh, we do not learn anything about the work of a heart specialist by being told that he's trying to make a living, or even that he's trying to benefit humanity. The profit motive and its offspring maximization of profits are just as irrelevant to the function of a business, the purpose of a business, and the job of managing a business. Very interesting way of shifting your brain. He's basically saying you're a moron. If you're a heart surgeon and someone comes up to you and goes, hey, what do? You would never go, I make a hell of a lot of money. Because that isn't why you're doing what you're doing. What you would say is, I keep people alive who have heart problems. And people will get what you're saying. Well, when you're planning out your next thing, if you're running after money, you're running after the irrelevant factor, because you can build money into almost anything. And that's the interesting thing now. Once you realize you can make money in almost anything, as long as it follows this other criteria, then you no longer, I'll give you an example. Let me see if I can pull this up. Give me 1 second. So imagine this. Let's say you're a man and you're looking to get married or fall in love. You go into a room, a party, okay? It's called the blonde hair party. Some friend, it's like, I'm doing a party and only blonde hair people can be there. So 100% of the women there have blonde hair, okay? And I come into the room and I go, what's your criteria for what you're looking for? And you go, look, Ty, got it narrowed down. I'm going to find a blonde-haired girl here because I like blonde hair. I would be like, what are you talking about? There's only blonde hair women in the room. So you need better criteria. Like, what's your secondary criteria? And so imagine this. Most business people are going after ideas just like that guy whose criteria is blonde hair. What I'm saying is, every good idea that satisfies a customer desire in every industry can make you richer than you could ever spend the money in your lifetime. Do the math. I mean, if you make, like I said, that Dish Network guy, $20 billion is his net worth, and you're making, at that level, it's easier to make high profit return. But let's just say you're making 5% on your, let's just say you take 5% a year, because pretty much you could take 5% a year and never run out of money, okay? So that means you're taking $1 billion a year basically as interest and dividends. That's $1 billion, and divide that by 12, right? That's how much money a month. It's $80 million a month, right? So your divided by 30 days, you know, it's hard to spend $80 million a month. You would be hard pressed to spend. Remember, that's not eating into the principal. That's just the interest. So wealth is being created at a level that it's unspendable, you know. So what you're not looking at is just the profit criteria, because or else you're just like the guy in a room with blonde-haired women, or the woman in the room with blonde-headed guys. with your only criteria as blonde, you're going to be lost. You need another criteria, like I like people who are shy, or I like people who are funny, or I like da da da. Like, what makes a happy marriage has been very interesting. I've been studying all what the modern science says of matching people. It's so much easier than anybody has ever figured out. Basically, depending on which personality type you look at, there's only one personality type good for you, and there's probably 8 to 16 personality types. So what you should do, according to scientists, you go into a room, if there's 100 blondes, you get them all to take a personality test, assuming you could get it pretty accurate, and you would narrow down 100 blondes to maybe 7 of them. That's the first thing you should do. And that's the same thing with business. When you had that idea for $1 billion idea, if it's outside of quote unquote your personality, you might as well drop it, because or else you're chasing a phantom, literally. I would say almost every entrepreneur that gave that talk, except one out of those 12, I felt like they're just chasing a phantom. Like, I'm like, these guys, I would bet against a lot of them. I wish there was an options market where you could bet against entrepreneurs. But that'd be actually a cool one. It's too hard to regulate, I think, and really in practicality. But because I would just look for criteria like this. I'd be like, show me people that have no expertise in what they're doing and it's not built around their personality, but they see dollar signs, and I'm like, I'll just blanket bet against all of them. I wouldn't even need to meet them. I was like, bet against them. And again, Jack Dorsey, if you catch that Canada interview, he says the same thing. Like, it's got to be something that matches who you are. So this is a bad way to build any kind of businesses, according to Peter Drucker. All right, let me take some more questions. I only answered one there. I forgot to. Yeah, Hobbes says people are innately evil and Leviathan. Loved your 4-hour talk the other day. So I did a online seminar for 4 hours. How long did you practice before talking so long it became easy? Any tips? No, I didn't practice that 4-hour one or take any notes. I think about them usually the day before, what I want to say a little bit. In terms of how can I talk for a long time, I mean, some of it's just personality type. So it's always come easy to me. So I build businesses around stuff that comes easy to me. If I build a business around talking, it'll be an easier business for me to build. It'll be hard for people to compete with me, because very few people can talk for 4 hours, interestingly. Or I don't know if I'm interesting, but at least interesting enough to keep people on a call. So if I just built it around profit, I'm like, I wouldn't try to build a technology company like Jack Dorsey. Most of those guys, almost every one of them, Jack Dorsey, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they're hardcore introverts. So if you're a hardcore introvert, it's better for you to build a behind-the-scenes job, for sure. And Steve Jobs had a very hard time public speaking, and he was never a great public speaker. I actually, one of the other guys I watched yesterday on YouTube was Phil Knight. You know who he is? He started Nike. That's a good business. By the way, you know how he came up with the idea from Nike? He was in Japan and saw this way they were making shoes there, and he brought it to America. I did a YouTube on that. I said, you want to know how to make $1 million? Go to another country and bring it back to wherever your market is. Some people were like, that's a stupid idea. I'm like, no, it's not. It's too smart for you because it's too simple. Some people want a complicated one. But anyway, Phil Knight he's given probably in 20 years. Try to Google Phil Knight, how many speeches he's given. He read from note cards. He was just like reading. It was a very boring speech in terms of the charisma level. So, but he was a great business person. So if you got to know if you're a front person, like you're going to be out front of the business, like Warren Buffett is very upfront. He's made a lot of money by being a good speaker and charismatic and stuff like that. So yeah, I just build stuff around. I don't just chase the profit. The profit is there in almost any business. Much like how the car replaced the horse, bots will replace many people's job. How do you think people can stay on top with the bot? Well, I don't think, people are going to get replaced. I can guarantee you. I don't know what percentage, but they're already replaced. So anybody who argues that, it's better to just get with it real soon. When you start seeing a whole bunch of teenagers texting, you might as well go, all right, I'm going to start texting. Or else you're one of these nut job people that's going to be quoted in a funny list in 50 years when you're like, airplanes? There was a guy, the head of the U.S. Patent Office in the 1800s, so patent where you secure your new invention. He said, I'm pretty sure just about everything that can be invented has now been invented. It's like 1880. Talk about blinders on, man. This guy didn't even... Probably everything somebody's ever imagined and told you in sci-fi is going to happen. There'll be flying cars. You and I might not be around. There'll be some limitless pill that changes DNA. It's all going to happen. I don't know if we'll be able to capitalize on it. One of my friends is super into human longevity. He's working on how to make people live longer, and I'm like... He's like, I'm not sure it's going to be for us, though. It's going to be for our great-grandkids. Okay, the cell phone carriers never believed that SMS text message will be used at all. Yeah, for sure. What do I think will replace texting? That's what I was saying. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I would bet on video. I think what you do is you always bet on what the human brain is currently built for. So the human brain is built for face-to-face. It's not built, so I'll give you a prediction that people wouldn't think I would predict. I think books will be gone soon. I can't imagine in 100 years people will be reading anymore. And I don't think it'll be bad. I think it'll be, if every book I've ever read was like a cool movie, I would remember even more. People think I remember a lot of books now. I'm like, no. If they were in story form, visual trumps. Ask any scientist. Words are artificial. That's why we all wear glasses in the modern world, because your brain, your physiology is not built to read small images. It makes you wear glasses. I mean, not always, but for the most part. So, okay, another question. The most perfect communication may be purely shared experiences without any logic whatsoever. Perception has primacy rather than information. This was a gold gem for me because I still have a hard time communicating my thoughts. I don't even remember that. That's in the book. That's cool. Yeah, the best way to communicate things is just to tell the story. People like stories the most. Without productivity object. All right, so where is my, here. All right, next. I'll tell you, I'm just going to do some random ones that a lot of people wouldn't have picked up on. I thought this was an interesting one. He's talking about, and by the way, here's a little thing. The importance of demographics. Remember I was talking about faith popcorn predicting? You can predict, the best predictions you can make are around demographic ones. Here's a good example. I used to have a place in Miami, just like a vacation place, that I would go to once in a while and live there a month or something. And when I was there, I met with these lawyers. I've told the story before, and I asked my lawyer, he was my lawyer for other stuff, I said, how's your business going? He goes, not good. I'm not collecting all the fees that clients owe me for my legal services. I said, what happened? He said, a lot of them are jumping out of buildings, committing suicide. And I said, and this is like 2008, I think. And so people had bought condos, taken loans at banks, leverage, owed $500,000. Now those condos at one point, you could there was whole office building, condo buildings where one person lived in the whole thing. So the HOA fees weren't being paid. So they couldn't even, your trash wouldn't even get picked up. So like trash was loading. Beautiful places in Miami. So I asked him, I said, what's his opinion? He said, look, Ty, I was telling every one of my clients, I did the math. There was 50,000 units built or something like maybe 50 or 250. I think it was 50,000 units built in Miami, South Beach, and only like 10,000 people were moving in net. More people were leaving than coming in. So he said, demographics, math, it's impossible. So you'd be surprised how much you can guess. If you want to be a future trend person, you can just build around demographics. That's a great way to build a business. So that does mean, by the way, a lot of good business ideas are going to be for a lot older people, because the most wealthy countries like Germany, I was with at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, I was with this one of the top German investor guys, and he said no one's having kids in Germany anymore. You know, so you're having a massive shift in Europe. Most of the kids in Europe now are from other countries, immigrants. So a lot of people are coming in from Africa, from the Middle East. So if you're building businesses that are going to be in Europe, you don't want to, if you're in Germany, you don't want to be building a lot of stuff for German kids, you know, native German. You might want to come up with ideas that people not born in Germany would be interested in. So demographics are just insanely good ways to build business. So one of the ways to have vision is not, intuition is one, but intuition sometimes will fail you because we get the blinders put on. Demographics is massive. So some of you, like Patrick, you're in a business, you know, finance, like financial planning is a huge business. One of the businesses I went into, because I forget the stats, but the amount of baby boomers over 50 are just insane. All kinds of markets, like online dating, the fastest online dating was dating sites for people over 50. So even though Tinder is like super hot, you know, and it's like this app, there's people making money hand over fist with, you know, the opposite of Tinder, which is like senior dating. It's not as sexy, but it's a great business opportunity. Now, hopefully, you know, if you're 18, I don't know that I would do the senior market unless I had a business partner that was older. Don't just chase the money. All right, so demographics. Here's another cool thing in this book. I'm just kind of randomly going through my notes. This is a great one. Most businesses have at least 2 customers. So we're talking about you got to build around the customer. The problem is sometimes people forget how many different types of customers you have. So for example, he gives an example here. He says, you know, if you're in the rug business, the rug and carpet industry has both the contractor and the homeowner. So if you manufacture rugs, you're not going to, for the most part, you're probably not the one putting them in the houses. General contractors who build the houses are buying from you. So you have to have a good price for them. You have to have reasons they buy from you. You have to be like, our carpet installs 10 times faster than our competition. You know, we ship in bulk and we give this much discount. So you build a product around that customer, and then vice versa. You have to, the general contractor, if they install carpets and the homeowner walks in and spills something on it and they can't get the stain out, they're going to call the general contractor and be like, what kind of crappy rug did you put in? Then he's going to call you up. So McDonald's, how many businesses? 2. McDonald's has the people who buy the McDonald's franchise and actually operate them. And they got to keep them happy because the franchisees are responsible for most, I think, of McDonald's sales. Then number 2, obviously people buying the food at McDonald's. Starbucks is a privately held company, so he doesn't have a customer who's an investor. He just has people buying coffee, you would think, the customer. But if you look at what Howard Schultz, how he built his business, he had to become very good at buying coffee from farmers and all this kind of stuff. So he had a second set of customers. So you have to be good at 2 things, minimum, customer-wise. And people really forget that, man. And sometimes your customer are your employees too. You know, you could even, I think you could add a third. I would say for the most part, the number of customers you have to satisfy, I think is 3. Very interesting, this Jack Dorsey, keep coming back to this. I wasn't planning to talk on it, but it's pretty interesting. He said he thinks of himself as an editor. So he has to edit different groups of people. He has to edit the customers, but he also says he has to edit his employees. So I think you have 3 customers. And some of you, if you get investors, I think you have 4. So number 1 is the user. So if you're selling McDonald's hamburgers, who eats the hamburgers? Not the franchisee, it's the person who actually Susie Q who feeds her kids McDonald's. All right, so you have the user of your product. Number two, you almost always have a vendor. So remember I was talking about you gotta be persuasive? You have to be persuasive to each of these, hopefully in equal proportion. So the vendor, almost everything you do, especially unless you sell something completely electronic, even then, you're gonna have a vendor. You gotta be a master of dealing, because there's a lot of businesses that have, customers love it, but they go out of business because they can't get the supplies. Trust me, a lot of coffee places make better coffee than Starbucks, but they couldn't buy the coffee right. They either pissed off the vendors, they couldn't meet the price or the volume that the vendors wanted. They weren't persuasive to the people selling them the coffee. You're out of business there. So you're the master of this one, not this one. It's a little bit like life. I always say there's 4 pillars of life you have to be good at. Well, it's a little bit, maybe we'll call these the 4 pillars, customer pillars. Now this isn't in the Drucker book, but you're on this call hopefully because you could read the book on your own. So I'm trying to elaborate on things that I think are also important in keeping with what Drucker said. The third one is your employees, okay? Because for the most part, you'll have a very hard time building a business completely by yourself. Remember I was saying that saying, every happy family is happy in the same way, and every unhappy family is unhappy in a million different ways. Basically, getting stuff wrong, there's a million ways to do it. Getting things right, there's like one. One of them is I've never heard, read a book, watched an interview with somebody successful, or in my own experience been like, you know what I don't need? Anybody else. It's impossible. You won't know how to build your website very well unless that's all you know. And if you know that, you're not going to know something else. There's many functions of a business. To be good at all functions is an impossibility. So you always hear people talk about other people's money is a way to make money. By the way, real estate is a horrible investment without leverage. People don't realize that. Horrible investment without leverage. The average piece of real estate, if you couldn't borrow bank money, has only appreciated like 2 to 4%. Do the math. You can look at it yourself. There's lots of stats like that, which means it's only working because they call that, OPM, other people's money. So when you buy a piece of property now in America, for the most part, if it's $1 million piece of property, you put only 200,000 or 300,000, then other people's money is given you, you're given 700,000 of other people's money, and then you just pay a teeny bit of interest on it, which is tax deductible in most, and that's why people get rich in real estate. But there's also not OPM, I call it OPE. There's other people's energy. Your energy is finite. You'll never, 10 people working 8 hours a day is 80 man hours. It is a physical impossibility for you to do 80 man hours. And this is, if I could go back in time and be better at business, I would be better at this. I forget who said it. Well, Warren Buffett says it. Jack Dorsey said it. Bill Gates says it. Steve Ballmer has a good talk. The former CEO of Microsoft. He owned 8% of Microsoft. That's a good amount to own when it was a couple $100 billion company. And he said, they all say most of what we do is finding and attracting talent and hiring people smarter than us. So that becomes a whole center of business. How are you, I'm trying to remember which book I just read. There was such a good book on this. Let me look through the books that no. All right, I'll remember in a second. Then the last one is investors, because depending on your business model, if you use other people's money, guess what? These people want a phone call. These people want to know what's up. Now, let's say you did not raise any money from outside sources. You built your business all on your own. Well, guess what? That means you're the investor. If you're married, that means your wife's an investor. And that's something people do wrong. They build a business but don't keep the quote unquote investors like their spouse happy, now you have a crappy life. Just like I talk about, the 4 pillars of the good life: health, wealth, love, happiness, and you have to be a juggler. You got to be a juggler on these 4 customer types. And I'm telling you, almost all entrepreneurs at best are good at that one. A lot of them are bad at employees, so they have a lot of turnover. Oh, I know who it was. I'm reading this Google book. By the way, this is the next book for next week, next 2 weeks. I'll show you in a second. It's an amazing book. It's insanely good. Another guy who was big on employees was Ford. So Henry Ford, when he started really the car industry as we know it, the average person made, I think, 90 cents a day, or 90 to $1 a day. And he came in, it was actually his business partner, had the idea, let's pay a minimum of $5 a day. So most of these people had skyrocketed. And what they predicted was overall costs would actually go down. And everybody thought they were crazy, but turnover is very costly. So if you're losing key employees a lot, you're in a lot of trouble. And that's why I think it was, Benjamin Graham, another guy like Drucker, he said it's almost impossible to overpay somebody that's good. But every penny you spend on someone who's not good is overpayment. So firing isn't that fun, but it's got to be done. It's editing. That's what Jack Dorsey said. Just like you're a magazine editor, it's like, what sentences do we have to cut and what do we have to keep? And so it's the same with investors. And it's definitely the same with your vendors. All right, moving on. I'm going to take another question here. By the way, I don't think tablets are going to win. This is my little, I don't think they are. I know people love tablets, but you know what's wrong with the tablet? It's hard to use them. I think tablets will be replaced with something else. You know that Apple Watch thing? That's pretty interesting. Because when I saw this Apple Watch, and I hate watches, I never wear a watch, but I was like, that is a genius idea, because if it can do everything your phone can do, but you wear it, because what's one of the big problems with phones? You lose them and drop them. So I was like, this is something. And also, what's more congruent with the way that human physiology already is? To have things useful to you attached to you or detached? And the answer is attached. If I chop your hand off, you're going to be very sad, because that thing is the most useful thing, because you always have your hands with you. You always have your feet. You always have, all these things. So Apple Watch, I was like, how could no one else have thought of that? That was my first thought. Every time I say, I'll tell you, when you know somebody's about to make a lot of money, is when something so obvious that 7 billion people just flew under their radar. I'm like, this thing, because then what you could do with these Apple Watches, eventually they'll be able to shoot like a bigger screen. You'll probably be able to make like a hologram or pull them out or something like that. Anyway, I don't know if I'm right, but I would definitely bet on Apple Watch being a cool idea, but who knows? It's a little bit hard. Sometimes it might not be the right time. In 5 years or 10 years. I can't imagine in 20 years we'll be carrying this bulky thing around. It'll be some crazy cool idea. But I'm bearish on tablets. What else were the unconvincing business presenters doing? So we'll talk for a second on persuasion. Every good speaker does the same thing, and bad speakers come up with 100 different ways to be bad. I got to read this quote here. Every family is happy. Okay, here we go, because I need to remember the quote here. It's from Anna Karenina. Yeah, Leo Tolstoy. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Imagine being a police officer. In LA, 50% of police officer calls are domestic violence. And every single one you walk into is going to be a different scenario. You know, some are holding, I saw this cops, I was just, for some reason someone sent me a clip on cops, and it was a woman in a car who had a knife, and she said she was going to kill herself or something. So the cops come, the husband's there like crying or something, and they tell the husband to get out of the way, and then they try to pull her out of the car. And right when they pull her out of the car, she starts swinging the knife at two of the cops, but one cop was from behind, so he tackles her. And then when they pull her up, she had fallen on the knife. It was crazy. I was like all the way in her stomach. It was pretty traumatic. I wasn't expecting that. I was like eating or something. I was like, oh man. But the point is, every dysfunctional family is doing weird crap. That one is, you know, got a knife in a car, screaming. One is drugs. But happy families, all the same. You walk in at dinner time, what is a happy family doing? They're kind of talking, probably all interacting, eating. So going back to these speeches, if you're ever presenting like for investors, you can't fathom how many dumb things, like I said, most of them couldn't get their presentation to go. Almost all of them had no stories. They were leading. One guy, the worst one, he had PowerPoint presentations with a lot of fine print. I would say it was like, just looking at this, it was about this big. I just wrote, by the way, hi, my name is Ty. That was what it looked like. And I was thinking, you know, each of them should have hired somebody to do the speech. There was one good one, and it was this guy who's, he had a cool video. It was the Dollar Beard Club, it was called. And so you might have heard of the Dollar Shave Club, which, believe it or not, is a $1 billion valuation company now in like 1.5 years. So this guy was for people, he had a big beard. He gets up on stage, he looked like a lumberjack, and his video works, which was good. And then it starts out, if you've ever seen the Dollar Shave Club, it's like this guy walking through a warehouse being like, do you want to shave? It's kind of a funny one. Well, this guy's the same one. He's in a warehouse, and he's like, do you have a beard? And he's walking all tough, and he's like, there's a guy shaving, and he's like, and you don't want to be a wussy, and he throws the guy out of the way. And then he goes to the next, and he goes, you know, if you have a beard, you're probably super busy doing things like this. And they went to down the aisle. You could see there was a guy with a big beard, and all these beautiful women were like, you're probably letting beautiful women pet your beard. And then it went to the next one. It's like, you're probably powerlifting. And they showed, it was like, so it was funny. It was entertaining. It was a story, and it was congruent with the guy. If he didn't have a beard, you know, you were less likely to be interested in investing. Just like one of those people who was 57-year-old dude with an app for like 14-year-olds, it almost feels like creepy. You know, you're like, what? Why is that? Why are you focusing on that market? Now, he wasn't creepy. I'm just telling you the amygdala reaction of humans. So to be persuasive, I think one of the things is people have to sense that it's really like you know? I think that's important. It sounds cliche, but it's not. Everything you guys are watching here, if you're in the different programs that I'm doing, I think people, you know, now that you're in it and you've been going through it, this isn't make-believe. It's not a set. It's not like I only put books up here when I do these calls. When you listen to me, you can sense that, yeah, I read the books. And so I think that congruency is by far the most important thing to be persuasive, I think. Blue earpiece connected to Apple Watch could replace the phone. Yeah, doesn't the Apple Watch have a phone in it? I think it has one. Can you just be like James Bond or something?
Samsung was the first one in
Yeah.
software, but it wasn't that big.
Yeah, Samsung, Apple is a smart company. They got a lot of brand. Dustin Moskovitz from Facebook recommends the following books for business advice. The Hard Things About Hard Things, Tao of Leadership, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership and the Facebook Effect. I've read maybe one of those. Okay. What about building wealth through an information business? Well, online education is going to be a $107 billion industry this year. So yes. I'm brand new to these business college. Could you explain the brand effect? Yes. So let's talk about brand for a second. So brand just means going back, and I take it a little bit differently than what most people will tell you. Think of brand this way. Imagine you're a guy or a girl. You are at a party. It is your friend's party, okay? So everybody there, you've known each other from grade school, okay? 20 years, the average length of time you've known everybody in that room. Think of what happens to your brain. Let's say you're a guy. So you're a guy, you're there with your 5 or 10 buddies. There's a knock on the door. You're watching the football game, okay? The door opens. One guy rolls in. He's got his shirt off. He's got like some muscles, and he just walks in all cocky. How many of you guys in that group will just turn around and go, "Woo! New guy, come on in," okay? Or how many of your first reactions will be like, "Who's this dude?" The answer is the latter. Almost everybody will be like, "Who is that guy?" Now, I'm not saying you'll say it or be rude. Now, women, same thing. 5 women, you're having a little get-together. The door knocks. Girl comes in. She's got high heels. She's beautiful. She's got a tight dress on. How many of you are like, "Oh, looks like I just made a new friend"? No. You immediately, when a guy with muscles walks in or a girl that's beautiful, threat alert goes up. And it will be that way until human DNA changes, which at this rate, I think it'll be about, I think about 100,000 years it takes with natural evolution to really minimum change our brain, something like that. 1% every 10,000 years or something like that. So, 10% in 100, it could be a million years. The point is, it's not going to happen in our lifetime. So here's what a brand is. You're sitting there with your 5 buddies. The door opens, and your 6th buddy comes in the room. You have no amygdala fear. In fact, when somebody comes in like that, you might not even notice them. You might just be like, "Oh, that's Zach." And you just keep doing what you're doing. That's what a brand is. Brand is the reduction of fear through familiarity. Now, that's not in this book, but I'm just telling you, that's my definition of a brand. It's something that reduces fear, and you could add from the human amygdala, which is a very powerful part of your brain. In fact, the number one reason if you're watching this, if you didn't feel super happy when you woke up today, it'd be because of some activity in your amygdala. The amygdala makes us not happy. But it does it for a reason. It makes you not happy because of mostly fear, right? You're not going to be happy if you're on put out on a tightrope and you're about to fall to your death. Every sensory part of, every sensory organ, every hormone in your brain, cortisol, adrenaline, they're all going to be heightened. And so this other book I'm reading, which is unrelated to Peter Drucker, talks a lot about the amygdala. Herman, my friend, that's a neuroscientist, same thing. So for you really have to be careful, or you have to understand when you roll out something new to people who don't know you, you don't have any brand effect, and you really have to overcome fear. I see it all the time. If I put up a Lamborghini commercial, 10% of people are instantly suspicious of me, angry, whatever word you want to. Why? Because if, let's say, what's the guy, Iron Man actor? Robert Downey Jr. If you see an article with Robert Downey Jr., and in the back, he's going like this on a Lamborghini, How many people do you think get angry? None, because he's Iron Man. The brand's been established. He's supposed to have a Lamborghini. There's a reduction of fear through the familiarity that Robert Downey Jr. represents a Hollywood A-list actor. It's totally normal. No one gets mad. But when it's the unfamiliar that doesn't have a brand, it causes more paranoia will come out. It's unreal. So for you, any idea you have, like you were talking, Christopher was talking about Samsung. They tried to do the Apple Watch. Samsung does not have as powerful of a brand as Apple. Pretty much everything Apple puts out technologically, we're familiar with the process that they make technology and how well everything pretty much works. So we're instantly give them the benefit of the doubt. Just like I said, if you're in a room with 5 of your friends and your buddy Zach or Susie opens the door and they're drunk, they're half naked, they look like, they just look a mess, you're not even going to be suspicious then. Because the brand, you're familiar with them and you're familiar with it's probably going to be fine. But when you're presenting to brand new people, everything has to be perfect because they're looking, Like I said, that one Lamborghini commercial, the biggest thing that got more people excited than anything is because people think it's a rental Lamborghini. That's what, about 5% of people. Because on the ring of the Lamborghini, there's a piece of plastic, which somehow somebody interpreted that plastic on a ring makes it a rental. It's not true. A new Lamborghini comes with a ring and it has a plastic piece on it. I don't know why. So, but the point is, for your new business idea, when you don't have a brand, people are going to nitpick it. And they're going to expect it. They're going to operate out of fear. And humans are going to be doing this for the next 1,000,000 years. Probably. At least 100,000. And that's why I think it was Gandhi or one of these guys said, first they ignore you, I think is how it goes. Then they hate you. And then eventually they love you. The only bad thing about, sometimes throughout history, most people like this get assassinated. That's how strong of the brand effect is. So just imagine, India is all operating, it has its brand. The brand of India used to be, it's an English colony. That's how the way it works. Everybody was familiar. Indian people were familiar with the system. It wasn't a good system, but people knew how it worked. The English, they didn't particularly like to go to India because they're from a rainy place and all of a sudden they're dropped into this hot culture that's all different food. But it was the status quo for a long time, hundreds of years. I think a couple hundred years. They had that whole trading, what was it called? The Dutch. Anyway, I forget it right now. So Mahatma Gandhi comes out fighting for independence. Guess who didn't like him? The Indian people didn't like him, because they're like, why are you shaking the boat? The brand we have is there. And the English sure didn't like him because he was taking away their colony. And what ends up happening? He gets shot. Abraham Lincoln. There was a brand in America. The North didn't have slaves. The South had slaves. This is a brand. It's familiar. Even people, no one wanted to rock the boat. No one likes to wake up and their amygdala is scared. So guess what happens? Bullet in the head. Martin Luther King Jr. You would think everybody would be for Martin Luther King Jr. No, bullet in the head. And it goes on, throughout history, it goes on and on because the brand effect is so strong that to shake up and introduce a new brand oftentimes is a bullet in the head. And in business, what's the representation of a bullet in the head? Bankruptcy. So when you fight a brand, sometimes you don't want to fight it head on. It's very dangerous because and if you create a brand, make sure you nurture that brand because it's hard for people to compete. The good news is once you have a good brand, it'll be very hard for people to compete with you. Apple can mess up the Apple Watch and people will still give them a pass. Now, if they do it, for 5 years in a row, it'll probably lose the path, lose that pass. What are my thoughts on the online peer-to-peer sharing and renting industry, such as Airbnb? Which demographics you will continue? Well, Airbnb has been one of the great success stories. Again, the next Airbnb, though, won't be Airbnb. it'll be something else. Like Airbnb came out of thin air. Again, who here couldn't have thought up Uber or Airbnb? Uber is just cars with an app and a map. That's all Uber is. But somebody had good intuition and stuck to it and beat a brand. Uber beat the cab industry. And it's funny, these cab industry people trying to fight Uber, you know, in every city pretty much. The only city in the US they've won is in Las Vegas. Las Vegas has 0 Ubers, but they won everywhere else. Paris, I was in Paris in England. The regular taxi drivers like beat up the Uber drivers. It's a big problem. They're like beating them up. Brand effect. I told you, when you fight a brand and trends brand, you better be prepared. Good thing, wear a bulletproof vest. That's what I would do. If you try to fight a brand, and wear a helmet. If you're giving speeches, John F. Kennedy was another dude fighting the trend, you know? Got shot in the head too. He was a very forward-thinking president. A lot of presidents get shot at. I read this book about Obama and Bill Clinton's presidency, and I think they get like 4 death threats a day or something. I never realized if you make a death threat on the president of the United States, you go on a list for years. And anytime the president is in your town, the Secret Service comes visits you. I thought that was insane. They have to make all these visits all the time. They just knock on the door and they're like, we're watching you. Now, that's if you don't make a serious threat. So even like just a little threat, they take it seriously. So, because again, the president is a brand, but a good president is always doing something new that's shaking up the status quo. And that's Ronald Reagan got shot, you know, same thing, because he was a very different kind of president. So, all right, we're going to wrap up in 7 minutes. So let me assign the next book, which is an amazing book. It's so good. I'll pull it up here. This is a great one. And this book, by the way, tells the story. It's written by the Google guy. So basically, it's by one of the guys who helped build Google. And it has a lot of things. It's not the same book. So we did the book a while ago, How Google Works by Eric Schmidt. This is not the same book, so don't read that again. Okay, here it is. This one is just amazing. And this is very important for you as a business owner because it's going to talk about things like hiring people. It's really big on building a team. So it's called Work Rules by Laszlo Bock. Let me come here. This is one definitely that's making it in my top 150. It gives you so much insight onto things that people think are the right ways to run business. And it's hard to argue with Google. Those guys talk about a brand. You know, a tough business? Imagine trying to build a search engine to compete. Google is such a strong brand. People use the word Google as a verb. Anytime, Twitter too. You know, tweet, Twitter. But Google is pretty much, did you Google it? No one says, did you Yahoo it? Did you Bing it? Look at Bing. I mean, Bing, that would be one I would bet against. I feel like they've done so well with Google. Facebook has done so well. These are massive brands. But Google, I think, will be one of the hardest ones to beat for many reasons. Mostly, you'll see in this book why they're going to be hard to beat. These jokers are smart. Ben, where's the rest of the... Oh, I know where. All right. Take a few more questions, then we will wrap up here. So Airbnb, my answer to that is if you're the person that's really interested in that market, go after it. But don't just chase the money, because or else you will more often than not fail. Can building in phases be a good strategy to fight the brand effect? So yeah, one of the ways you beat a brand is not take it head on. Like Facebook just started with just one university. then it didn't go after MySpace's whole market. And that's a mistake people make. They underestimate the brand effect. In Spain, Uber is banned. They deliver food instead of taxi. Okay, so Uber is a way you can get food. But you mark my words, Uber will get, I bet you they'll be everywhere soon. That's a smart company with a lot of money. Should we necessarily keep the means of capturing value in the back of our head when constructing a user-based business? Instagram seems to have immense paper value before even selling any ad space. Yeah, so there's some businesses now that don't have any revenue that are very valuable. Like WhatsApp didn't have very much revenue compared to how much they sold for. Twitter didn't have much revenue. Uber was, most of these companies, even if they have revenue, are operating at a loss. So this actually proves Peter Drucker's point. If you have a business like Instagram that makes, see, remember, Instagram makes zero revenue. Just now they added in advertising for big brands. But let's just say as of 6 months, they had absolute zero revenue, only costs. Hosting all those pictures is expensive, programming, all that. So they're burning money. But the value of a business is cash flow, but Peter Drucker was right. The value of a business is a customer. And Instagram had whatever, 100 million customers. So if you can create customers even before you know how to get money from them, you will have a valuable business. I think it's great to build a business that has both, but if you get investor money, like Uber has raised, I think $800 million, maybe even 1.2 billion. It's an incredible amount of money. So I don't think they're profitable at all yet. They're just burning through money, getting more drivers, keeping the costs down. Jeff Bezos, Amazon wasn't profitable for a long time, and all Jeff Bezos cared about was acquiring customers because he was creating a brand effect. It's hard to compete. Amazon is another nasty one to try to compete with on a big scale. Imagine trying to make an everything store where people can, look, they put in all the bookstores out of business. That's just in books. They're in everything. They're in food delivery. They're in diapers. Now they're going to be making entertainment shows. They're going to be competing with Netflix. That's the power of having customers. So yeah, let me end by saying this, because we didn't really get into this. What is a customer? And I'll tell you what a customer is, because a lot of people are confused. Here's some characteristics of what a customer is. It has to be repeat. Just remember that. That's the key word. So you're going to meet somebody that creates a business that can sell, always looking for new customers. Well, they don't really, Alan Nation, one of my mentors, used to say, don't really count them as customers until they buy more than one time from you. That's a characteristic. So Instagram has people going on every day. So even though there's no revenue, they have real customers because of repeat. I think another thing is, going back to the analogy, you're in a room, people walk in, your old friend Zach looks all disheveled, but you're not suspicious because you've got familiarity. So it's like real familiarity. And that's why going back to businesses should be built around a story, because it's easy for brains to get familiar with the story. It's very hard to get familiar with just a number. Like if I owned a hotel, if you went to my website, the first thing I would have it'd be the story of the founder. I think that's so good. I don't know why hotels don't do that. People love it. They will. Remember, business, even though we think it's so sophisticated, wait 50 more years. Everything that businesses are doing now are going to look like the Stone Ages. And one of the things is bet around how the brain works. The brain remembers stories. Hilton Hotel would be better. And I was reading their book. That's in my room. He said if it was built around the story of Conrad Hilton. It's a great story. Rags to riches story. His great-granddaughter, Paris Hilton's pretty well known. That's probably why they don't want the story in there. They might not want her associated with the brand. But his story is a great story. So I think at McDonald's, Ray Kroc did this. That's why he invented Ronald McDonald, because he wanted there to be like a story, a character, and he put a clown outfit on him because that means if he built it around a person, that person couldn't be at every store. But if it's a costume, every McDonald's franchisee just gets the costume and puts it on a random dude. So stories sell. So familiarity and people who buy into your story. Man, you get them to buy into your story, and I feel like you'll have a customer for life. Just think of it this way. Who here has a friend that if you did the math on why you're friends with them, it makes no sense? You're like, you give them a birthday card. Have they ever sent you a birthday card? No. Like, you do good stuff for them. You pay the bill whenever you guys go out to dinner. Do they ever volunteer? No. Like, there's all these check marks against them, but you know what? They're your old buddy from 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So you're like, that's just Bob. He's kind of a jerk. But if it was a new person and you met him on day one, you would never be friends with that person. That's also what a customer is. It's somebody who will overlook your mistakes. You know, Netflix made a big mistake. They changed their whole pricing and they had huge backlash, all this public backlash. But Netflix was a strong enough brand that they apologized. That's all. Reed Hastings just was like, oh, sorry. And then 3 months later, they were fine because they had real customers. People like talk about if you ever used Blockbuster before. So I remember when I was living in San Diego and I rented I was working on a project, so I was like in my house 12 hours a day, every day for like 3 months. So I was like burning out, and my friend's like, dude, you have to watch Sopranos. I had never seen Sopranos. This was like in 2008 or something. And I got the first one, and I don't know if you've ever seen Sopranos. It's good. I was like, man, this is the best thing I've ever seen. So I went to Blockbuster, and I rented like, 10 of them or something. And then I had to go out of town unexpectedly, and I came for like 3 weeks, and I came back, and I hadn't even watched them all, and I noticed it was overdue and late. So I went back to Netflix. Oh, they sent me a thing. You ever seen the thing where like you now own these? They made me buy them. It was like $400 or $300, and I was like, what? So I drove back to Netflix, and I was like, I'm 1 day over, dude. I don't want these. Once I know myself, when I watch something once, I never watch again. So I was like, here, I'm gonna give them back to you. They're all packaged. I didn't even use them. And the guy's like, no, man, we can't. And I was like, why not? And he's like, and I remember I just left. I was like, they're yours. They are not mine. And I was so pissed, I never went back to Blockbuster. Think of what Netflix did. They eliminated all the anger. Netflix, basically, you can keep it for 10 years. They just don't give you another one. And it's built around fairness. You're like, okay, that's fair. It wasn't fair in my brain what Blockbuster did. Because I was like, it's only been 1 day, and who cares? I never read the terms and conditions. If you ever looked at Blockbuster, had like fine line. That's why on all the products that we have a refund. Because it's better to build a customer around doing stuff that they're going to think is fair, you know? So when you add up all these, Netflix built real customers. And so I would say the last thing is a real customer is forgiving. And remember, you have 4 kinds of customers. You have employees, vendors, the actual end user, and you have, end user, vendors, investors, and employees. So you want the same thing with employees too. They buy into your story. They're forgiving, you know? You might launch a business and you can't pay them 1 month, but they bought into your story and you're like, listen, I can't pay you, I'll pay you more later. And a good example of that is Conrad Hilton. When he was building the Hilton hotel chain, the 1929 crash came, the biggest depression in American history. And he had all these hotels he had opened across the United States, and almost all of them he had to close. He went bankrupt. But his one favorite hotel was in Texas, I think in Dallas. And all the people that supplied food for the hotel, like the farmers back then, would come with, a milk wagon. And he went to one of the guys who delivered milk and he said, look, it's 1929. Everything went to crap. I have no money to pay you, but I still need the milk. And he said to that guy, he said, if you deliver this milk to me and let me pay you back later, I not only will pay you back, but I'll never forget this. And sure enough, when things turned around, he gave that guy shares and made him a millionaire back in the 30s. See, the vendor, the guy delivering the milk, not the people sitting in the hotel room, because that guy bought into his story, and because they were familiar and it was a repeat guy, the guy was forgiving. And just like, and you see that happening in Netflix, people will forgive you if they're familiar with you and they buy into the story and you're genuine. So it's a much better way to build a business. Apple's done some messed up launches. Microsoft definitely did some messed up stuff, but they had that brand. So, all right, so I'll see you guys 2 weeks, okay? Make sure you're going through the, read this next book, this Laszlo Bock one. It's such a good one. So if there's any other questions, email me. See if there's any last questions, or we'll wrap up here. The link I was emailed did not work, so you're just coming on now. Is it going to be recorded? Yeah, we'll send you a replay of this. We don't do that for most people, but in the advanced business stuff, you guys get access to the replay of this call. What does it take to work for me? Is loyalty you're still number one? Yes, I put loyalty at the top. And we are starting to hire more, so we can talk about that later. What's one best piece of advice you have for the day? Could go any way you want. Well, the biggest advice thing that's in my brain now the last few weeks, really map out what winning looks like for you. This is very hard. And it sounds simple, and it's hard. If you do it right, it'll take you a couple months to write it out. I'll put it to you that way. It's not like 2 + 2 is 4. That'll take you 10 seconds. What does winning in life look like for you? So, does winning in life look like for you having a Ferrari and Lamborghini? Because if it doesn't, don't have one. I don't care how rich you are. Be like Warren Buffett. He just drives his old cars. But Warren Buffett, private jet looks like winning for him. So he has a private jet. And it's easy to assimilate other people's definition of winning. And the problem is sometimes that's a good way to do it, but oftentimes you end up living your whole life for something. I read someplace, I don't remember where I read this. It's one of the great, I know. It's a couple 100-year-old, I think it's Darwin or Freud or something. And they basically said, be careful what you wish for, because you might get it and then realize you never wanted it. And that's pretty much how I feel most successful, quote unquote, people on paper that I bump into. The amount of people, the reason I like Warren Buffett and talk about him, when you see Warren Buffett, you know that dude is living out the real story. You see it on people's face. Most successful people that I meet, they're exactly forgetting those words. They got exactly what they dreamed they wanted 20 years ago. And it's almost like a curse. That's the greatest curse you could have. There's different curses they used to have. One of them is, may you outlive your children. Like, that's a curse. No parent wants to be burying their kids. It's better for you to die before your kids die. But another one is, may you work for something for 30 years, get it, and then realize you never wanted it. Oh, I know who it was. That's Seneca, the Roman philosopher. He says that on his book on happiness. So I can't tell you how many times in my life I got all these benchmarks and milestones, and then you get them and you're like, I don't care. And I just spent 10 years getting something. Then you lost time, and losing time is something you will always regret. I'd say that's the number one regret. They said the 3 big regrets are who you dated or married, your education, and your career. But you could sum all of those up, or you regret anything, you can't get the time back. See, you wouldn't regret marrying the wrong person if you lived forever, because you're just like, those 10 years, 25 to 35, but I'm gonna live to 900, so I got a lot. But since we are not in that universe, maybe there's a parallel universe like that, your biggest regrets will be about time. So when you set goals, because everybody's huge on goals, and whenever you're like in a session, like you go to a business thing or you read a book, it's like, write down all your goals and da-da-da. I don't give that advice because everything most people are writing are some other person's definition of winning. And I know that most of the people writing that down, when they get that, they're going to be like, holy crap, I spent my whole life on something I don't care about. When I was, it's funny, envy is one of the things Charlie Munger talks about. He said that's the deadliest sin. You know why? It's a very interesting reason why he says envy is the deadliest of all sins. He says it's the only sin that you won't enjoy. Think about it. It's like 10 Commandments. Okay, murder. There's times you're going to murder someone and be like, I feel damn good when I'm done. Really. I mean, I know that sounds horrible. Trust me. If you were in your house and you walk in and somebody's attacking your family and you shoot that guy, you're not going to be like, oh, my big regret. You're going to be like, that felt good. If I saw a thing where a guy's son had been molested by a karate teacher or something, and that dad, when they were deporting the guy to go to prison, the dad waited at a phone booth. It's on video, you can see it. And when that dude walked by with the police in cuffs, the dad just turned around and said, why'd you do that to my son, and shot him. And I don't think you should do that for lots of reasons, but I guarantee you the dude didn't feel bad about it. So Charlie Munger says, that, he talks about all the other one, adultery, gluttony. While you're eating the food, you're like, this is awesome, right? But envy, he was saying, that's the only one that at no point are you happier for it. So when I was watching the Jack Dorsey thing, I was thinking, man, this guy's young. He's already built $2 billion companies. And I would start envy. It's like, why didn't I do that? And then I realized if I was that dude, I would be miserable. I don't want to build a nerd alert technology company and be surrounded by 500 programmers. I'm not saying that what he did is wrong, but I'm saying my natural inclination is that anytime you see success, you get all excited. If you see a guy with a beautiful girl, or vice versa, if you're a woman or whatever, sometimes you're like, ooh, ah. But if you were that guy, you might be like miserable with that girl. I've learned about myself. There's lots of beautiful women in the world. There's not that many that I actually get along with if I was with them on a day-to-day basis for a long time. So once again, that's kind of the analogy. Be careful of who you get all excited about marrying, because a lot of people, once they're married, are like, uh-oh, this was the biggest mistake of my life. And that's how I feel about goals. Most people are marrying themselves to literally the world's worst goals, or the worst goals for their constitution. My favorite book is still Freud's Civilization and Its Discontents, even though people always tell me, but don't you know Freud's been discredited? Not like people think. Freud is a very smart. I think he's the smartest guy I've ever read, even though he does get into some weird theories he had, but everybody had stupid. Einstein had theories that were disproven. Every scientist now will have their theories disproven in 100 years. So I still like Freud, and he says, remember, everybody. Let me see if I can find this. This is worth ending on. This is one of the great sentences ever written in a book. This is the book that I read the most, by the way. If you ever want to know what I read, probably every 3 days of my life for 365 days a year. So he says here, and this is his way of saying winning. All right. Chapter 2. See if I can find it. That book, if you haven't read it, by the way, little note on this book. Don't read chapter 1 or 3. No, I'm sorry. Only read chapter 3. I think that's right. Or is it chapter 2? Yeah, only read chapter 3, because some of it is very unreadable. Like, every time I read it, I'm like, I don't even know what he's talking about. He's one of the harder people to read. Especially, what happens with that book is a lot of people read chapter 1, and they can't get past it. Yeah, it's chapter 2 and 3 that I like. So he goes through the 8 things that make people happy. So he talks about love is one of them. The enjoyment of beauty is another one. Intellectualism is another one. Religion is another one. Chemical. You know, it's interesting watching Cops. I've been watching Cops. It's only drugs. That's all cops do in that movie. They get people for drugs. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. It shows you how powerful that bias is. All right. I can't find it. Anyway, so he says, in a nutshell, he says you have all these ingredients, these 7 or 8 things that people pursue. And he said everybody has a different constitution. And now scientists will call that homogeneity versus, being heterogeneous. And humans, now scientists, biologists understand the reason you don't make humans homogeneous is lots of bad things like mutations, parasites, disease, and it's kind of like not diversifying a business. It's very dangerous. So when it comes to winning, what winning for you is, the odds of it being what winning is for me is very low. It's probably like 1 in 12. So what you have to do is mix and match parts. So like when I look at Jack Dorsey now, the Twitter founder, what I like about him, what I envy, so to speak, not that you want to have envy, is not the businesses he actually built, not the way he actually dresses, but it's just a simple thing. I like how he built 2 businesses so fast and so young. So I want to, that's winning for me. So that is winning for me, by the way. Doing stuff for me in a certain time frame. When I look at Warren Buffett, it's not winning. That part of Warren Buffett is not as interesting to me. Warren Buffett is a super slow and steady guy to the extreme. Like, he started at 7 and was a billionaire at 57. And to him, he loves it. He likes slow and steady. He doesn't like taking any big risks like that. I mean, he obviously took some, but he's cool with 50 years. And that's not winning to me. But there's lots of stuff that Warren Buffett does do that's winning. So if you can figure out your own constitution, some of you are slow and steady people, it's going to feel great to know that every day you're notching up a little bit, even if it takes 20 years. Some of you are insanely ADD, and now, let me just say this. Constitution does not mean character flaws. Some things are just character flaws. Like, just because you're ADD, you're not going to be able to build a business in 1 week or something like that. So, but some people are definitely built to be faster movers. And what I would say is, honestly, the odds of me being as wealthy as Warren Buffett are very low for lots of reasons. He's smarter than me. He started, but mostly, if you want to build massive wealth, it's better to do the Warren Buffett way. Build it step by step. Because if you have an 8% growth rate from 7 to 57, you'll be a billionaire. But for me, I'm not as into being the richest man in the world. So therefore, I'm willing to sacrifice some of the wealth because my constitution, I would have a hard time, 50 years trading the way that Buffett trades and buys stuff. Does that make sense? So that's my biggest takeaway. Define and really write out. I don't write out goals as much anymore, but I do write out what winning. I went to Palm Springs and I wrote a long list. It's a freaking crime that nobody has ever said this before. I'll tell you that. Talk about a crime. People talk about crimes happening in the world. I'm going to tell you a big crime. Every kid before you're 18 should have a long list of realistic. Because some people, if you ask them what winning is, it's like all outrageous. It's like, I'm a trillionaire. I'm 10 years old and I'm already a trillionaire. I can float. That's not what I mean, but winning. It's like what you actually could pull off if you stretch yourself, and that you would really be like if I was a trillionaire, I know I wouldn't be. In fact, I've actually found this. There is a saying: with more money you make, the more worries go up. So, what? Biggie Smalls says that?
More money, more problems.
There we go. Biggie Smalls was a very wise man. More money, more problem. There's some truth to that. So anyway, all right, guys. Talk to you in a couple weeks, and I'm adding a whole bunch of new stuff to the recorded curriculum. So hang on. I got some cool new stuff that I'll be recording this week and uploading. So you can watch that in the meanwhile too. Okay? Talk to you soon. Oh, leave one comment here below. The biggest takeaway that you got from these 2 hours, okay? Leave something to remind yourself, like a mental journal. One action point for the next 2 weeks.